into this. So today we are talking about getting your brush lettering look so that you can do fauxligraphy. And now, if you do brush lettering, why might you want to do fauxligraphy? And here's the why, because there are amazing pens like the Liquid Chrome by Maltov, which is like, honestly, it's like writing with a mirror. So let's just do a little, didn't shake it beforehand. You always need to shake these pens, but it's like writing with a mirror. And then my favorite gold is the Sakura Pen Touch Gold. This is like writing with a golden mirror or writing with a leprechaun. It makes a beautiful, gorgeous, reflective gold. And so these pens don't come in brush pen options. So what are you going to do to be able to write with these pens if you want a brush lettering look? And that is when you are going to do fauxligraphy. Now, typically fauxligraphy is taught like this. So if we have our brush letter, I'll just do quickly with a brush pen, the word brush. And then if you were to do your fauxligraphy, first you'd write out your word brush, and then you go in, let's pretend that glitch in the matrix didn't happen. Then you would go in and you would add thickness to every single stroke. And you would do it typically on the one side. So you go down every one of them, adding your thickness, and then coloring it in. But let's look at what happens when we color this in. So I'm trying to rush so that you're not just sitting here watching me color all day, because that's not really teaching you much. So if you do it where it's always on the one side, you are going to be really messing around with the placement of your letters in relation to one another. And sometimes, for instance, in this U, it gets really squished on the inside because you've taken this whole portion of the bowl of the letter and essentially cut it in half by adding that downstroke thickness. So you've really taken what was a nice curve and gone and chopped it right in half, squished it right up. So that also gives you a look where your letters are very inconsistent. This R now looks very open and compared to this U, because we cut it in half, but also because all of the weight of the B was added on this side. Now the R is actually growing out of the B rather than coming off of its own stroke, which it has a little bit more of here, but let's be honest, that wasn't my best brush lettering. Anyways, let's pretend that part didn't happen. So now the way that I want to show you is not a way that you need to come along and write like this is how we write a B every single time, because that's unrealistic. I want you to be able to have a win right now with your own handwriting. So this is actually how I would write brush. That's my handwriting. And that is what I want you to be able to use to do your fauxligraphy. Don't be mad at me if you're thinking, no, that's not how it should be. I want fauxligraphy to be something that anyone can do, because just a little teaser, in November and December, I have a whole bunch of different holiday tutorials that are perfect, quick tutorials for you to be able to give gorgeous gifts and make your house nice and warm and comfy cozy this holiday season. But a lot of these you need brush lettering for. And what if you don't do brush lettering? Well, I want anyone to be able to do the tutorials, so that is why we are working today on fauxligraphy. In case you don't do brush lettering, you can take your own writing and make it look gorgeous, just like brush lettering would be. So the first thing that you need to do, I want you either on a plain piece of white paper, or if you have your handout, on the letter pump up practice. Actually, I'd suggest on the back first. Write your name, just how you would write it. And then we're going to take a look at some of the issues with the writing and things that you're going to need to adjust before you move on to your fauxligraphy. So this is how I would write my name. And to look at it, there are a few things that you want to look for in your own name. Are you writing with skinny little letters? And typically letters that will go skinny are A, E, there's another one with a little tiny loop like this. E, this one's just the killer. And so many people have E's in their name. A, E, O even. If you're writing those letters too small, you're not going to leave yourself any space for filling in or widening up one of those letters there. So with your lettering, not even lettering, but with your handwriting, take your name and now write it so that it's been stretched out a little bit. Take any of these bold letters with the circle or letters with this little tiny half circle, and make those wider. And then these other letters, if you write like me and it's more up and down, they also need to be wider. So write your name again and just give it a little bit more space between the letters and between the strokes in the letters. So while my A here is still pretty tiny, the other ones have a little bit more space to play with. And you can see that this is not by any means that perfect brush lettering or even perfect handwriting that you would expect your handwriting to have to be in order for it to be gorgeous. You don't need that. You just need a base where you have taken your letters and made them a little bit wider so that you have space to do your downstrokes. Now, I'm going to take a second color just so that you can see the lines. And when I'm doing fauxligraphy, because it can be hard to remember where your upstrokes and downstrokes go, one thing that I like to do is ghostwriting, which is not about haunting your paper or anything like that. It's about writing your letters again, but mimicking on top where your pen would come down towards your body. Those are your downstrokes. So here it's moving away from my body and here it's moving down towards my body. So ghost lettering is just tracing in the air above, but ghost lettering makes it sound way cooler than tracing in the air above. So that's why it's ghost lettering. So any instance where your pen was coming down towards your body, you're going to draw a line on one side of your initial line, your initial portion coming down. But that's not it. Now you're going to draw a line on the other side as well. And these don't go all the way from the top to the bottom, just the part where it's coming straight down. So again, for an A, this portion here, it comes straight down. And then you're going to trace your next letter with ghost writing. So we're going up, that's up, 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 up. And then here we are coming down. So let's trace on one side of the letter and trace on the other side of the letter. And it starts to look like a hot mess. So here we go up and then we come down again, trace on one side of the letter and the other side. Going up, so nothing, and down. So here, tracing on either side of the letter again. And you're gonna go all the way through like this. Okay, we came up, oh, and then, all right, my pen came down to make that curve, up, down for that line, and go through and give yourself a line on either side of the areas where your pen moved towards your body. And like I said, at this step, prepare for it to be a hot mess because it just now looks like, well, honestly, a mess. Or, you know, those old calligraphy pens from back in the 80s where it just was straight across with the one break in the tip? What is that, italic? And you would go through and draw your letters and it would have that beautiful space in the middle. That's essentially what you're doing because you're outlining that straight down line that you first did. But don't worry because we're not ending here. Now, so our first modification that we've done is rather than going through and only putting our downstroke on the one side of the letter, like we're typically taught, instead of that, you have now added those downstrokes to either side of the letter. And that helps to give you more balance to your letters and helps to retain the lettering that you're doing. So it still keeps the same spacing between your letters and hopefully allows you to have a little bit of space in the middle there. So now what do? Now we're going to start making this look less messy. And all of the lines that are light blue, so all of your initial lines, you're going to end up retracing. And that is an important part of this step Because another thing with this style of fauxligraphy is you don't end up retracing those initial lines that you had. And sometimes it can look like you went from a single line to this thicker line and there's no real transition. We want it to look like there is a nice transition from one to the next. So here, you want to go in and trace your original line and then meet up with that downstroke thickness that you've put in. And you do that for one side. And then you're going to go in and trace that line again and meet up with your downstroke thickness. Now, we'll do that again, exiting our letters. So going down and tracing that line again, and tracing that line again. So what this has achieved, let me do it on a bigger sheet here. If this was my A, I don't want to do it too big because then you won't even really see the downstroke. So we've done those two lines, but by tracing over to one line and then to the other, you've achieved a perfect curve on both the top line and the bottom lines. And so it's also giving you a natural increase in the width of your letter, rather than it suddenly going from thin, okay, we've added some thickness here, the end. Now it's a much more natural curve on both sides. So then on the bottom of your letter, you also want to trace out following that line. And here we're going to connect this as well to that line. And I trace over the upstroke as well every single time. So from the inside and the outside, because that can give you then a much more natural look to the flow of your line. And sometimes when you're doing brush pen lettering, this upstroke, it's not perfect every time. We wouldn't expect it to be this thin line every single time in every place. So that's why if you're tracing over it, you are going to get a little bit of variation in your line. And that's a much more natural approach to the look of brush lettering. So here we've done now lines on either side. We're going to draw and trace onto that single line where it's the upstroke, where there's no pressure. And so from this point, you're essentially just curving in to connect the dots. And that would be your next letter. Let's move on to, I know you probably have the rest of your name to finish, but I want us to be able to work on one word together. So again, this brush lettering takes you through the 6 steps that we are talking about here today. And here I use the word enjoy, and we are going to do this word together. And the reason I want to choose this one is because it has a tiny E, which often is an issue, and it has a loop down on the bottom here. And I want you to be able to get all of your letters looking amazing so that you're not stuck after this lesson. So we have all the steps here. If you want to download this worksheet, it also has an entire page where it shows the regular letter, adding the downstroke on either side, connecting off your downstroke, and then retracing the whole letter. So if you want a cheat sheet, that is also included. So we are going to move on to our lettering pump-up practice, where we're going to do a word together. I'll start with my lighter blue. Of course, you can just even use a pencil or whatever bullet tip pen you have. And let's write the word enjoy. So we already talked about how you have to make your letters a little bit wider, and that's our first step. Here I have boxes set out for each one of your different letters. Now, this is not hard and fast like when you're trying to fill in your mailing address and you need to have one single letter in every box. This is a guideline for you to be able to follow to encourage you to increase the size of your letters. So let's write the word enjoy together. Now, because it's an E, you probably, for regular writing, just do it off the bottom like that. But this could also very easily be mistaken for an L. So usually when you're doing an E in brush lettering, you want to start from the midpoint of the letter and loop around. See, instead of meeting at the base of this letter here, it moves up and it's meeting halfway between the top and the bottom of your E. So let's start our E in the middle and just write one letter per box. So nothing fancy about this writing. This is just, anyone's regular handwriting when it's spread out. And the other thing about these boxes is it forces you to slow down so that it's not quite as messy as it probably is normally. And now with your pen, go in and trace on each side of your downstroke. So do your ghostwriting. So here we were going up, and now here we're starting to come down. So we're tracing just that downstroke portion on either side. And I know that up here, you're going in the downward position. It's true, but if you just do the part where you're coming straight down, then that will give you space to be able to give a nice curve to the tops of your letters. So continuing on with our ghost lettering, we come up. Oh, here we're coming straight down to our body. Trace on either side. Here we're going up, straight down to our body, trace on either side. Going up, straight down to the body, trace on either side. And again, when it starts to curve, stop tracing. Don't go down into that curve. Coming up, straight down to the body. It's just a little bit up, and you can even put a tiny bit up there if you want. If you don't want to on that part of the O, that's totally fine too. And this part straight down to the body, going up, straight down to the body. Oh, I went a little bit far on that. So if you accidentally go a little bit far, just do it shorter the next time. You don't have to start again. You can always sort of fiddle around with it and make it work. And then here we continue all the way up. Now we're going to go through and redraw where we're doing our upstroke. So the part where it's just the single thin bit, and connect it with the inner stroke of that letter. And now we have our outer stroke. So we're going to do it again. Drawing up and connect to the outer stroke. And look at that beautiful curve that's given us, both on the inside and the outside. And let's extend off the bottom of that curve. So we're going to be retracing this upstroke here. Sometimes I find that if I'm nervous about going into a certain line, worried that I can't get it right on the same place, doing it with ghostwriting just a few times where you're sort of tracing over the top prepares your muscles to be able to do it in real life, that second time when you're actually touching the page. So again, you can practice trace. And the other thing is, if you need to, take a break. Lift your pen up. That's better than going blind, because when I'm doing this part here, I can't actually see the line that's coming. So lift up your pen, take a look at the line, and then when you can see again, continue. And so we're extending this thin line now onto both sides of the downstroke portion of the N. Now at the end of the N here, there's nothing for this to connect onto. Instead, we can just close that line up and move on to our upper curve. So curving up, meeting the left-hand side of that letter, and going up and meeting the right-hand side of that letter extension. And then here we'll curve right into the upstroke. So remember, you're tracing both sides, out from both sides of your thickened area. Close the top, because that part doesn't lead into anything. It's the bottom that leads off. And again, take one side of your line and then tracing just your upstroke. And if you need to take a break, this is the perfect place to do it, right in that body of the Y, because no one will see that you picked up your pen there. Whereas if you push yourself to continue on, there's a good chance that you're not going to hit that line perfectly. So tracing that line, and again, I like to do it twice, just because it gives that natural variation then to it. And let's take both sides of the O down and around. And again, in that crossover point, that's a good place to lift up your pen. So now the outside, down, and then tracing back on that same line. And we'll do the same from here. We can pick it up again, trace to the outside. And see, this one's a little bit hard because there's a lot to do in a tiny spot. Trace to the inside, and now we'll trace both of those curves out and into the next letter. And again, if you need to, take a break in that meeting up point and then start on again to trace onto the outside. We are almost done our letters. We'll take the inside of the Y and trace up, and now take the outside of the Y and trace up. And this is giving us, again, those really nice soft curves on both the inside and the outside. So closing off the top of the letter. Now let's finish this one off. We're so close to done. Take a break in that part of the Y if you need to. Trace the other side and then into your straight line. And don't forget that tail. Trace that, again, not once, but twice. And our final step, don't forget your dot on top. I always look at the dot and think, okay, the width of the downstroke right below the letter, that's how wide the dot should be as well. So thicken that dot up so that it looks like it is a part of the line down below. And our final step now is to color in the letter. Because you have all of those curves already done, you're just filling in the body portion of the letter right here. You don't need to worry about extending your line anymore. This is just the final touch. And now we have a word that still is very legible. Those letters are still nice and open. We've managed to create soft, gentle curves on both the inside and the outside, and none of the letters are too close together. Nothing is coming out of where it shouldn't come out. So let's try one more word. What word should we try next? Let's do the word, okay, I want to do peace because that one is also going to be a tricky one. Why do we keep doing tricky ones? But peace is good because when you do a P, usually you have some sort of little loop-de-swirl in here. That's definitely a technical term for it. And we need to make sure that that loop-de-swirl doesn't just turn into another big fat mess. So that sort of thing was happening here with the B. And then over on this side, we lost it because adding in the fauxligraphy covered it up completely. What should we do in order to make sure that this little loop stays around? We need to make it bigger. So let's write the word peace, which will also have one of those little loop-de-swoops, and make sure that you're writing it with everything having a little bit more space. So again, I'm trying to write not in my brush lettering. I'm trying to just write what my handwriting would be. I do peace pretty loop-de-swoopy. Yep. And now we're going to go in and follow our exact same steps. So ghost writing, trace on either side of all of those downstrokes. And I'm going to speed this one up just a little bit, but don't go all the way into the curve on those downstrokes, just the portion of the downstroke where your pen is actually going straight down. So on a C, that's just a little bit here, just a tiny little guy with the downstroke. Once you've drawn in all your downstrokes, now it's time to go back, close off any endings where it doesn't continue on to something, and trace out all of your thin lines to lead to both sides of your letter. Take both sides of your letter and trace it into your thin lines as well. That gives you the really nice curve both in and out of your letter. Now the A here, there's again a lot happening. So go slowly and do it step by step, from the single meeting point to one side, from the single meeting point to the other side, and then back here again, just to that single thin upstroke line there. Now here we're going down, single thin upstroke, down, single thin upstroke, and with the C, start off at the top and connect with that same line to both sides of your curve. And then again, same line. Oh, I went a little bit off, and that might happen to you, and that's part of getting a little bit of variation to it. Try to minimize that, but you know what? These sorts of things are going to happen, and just roll with it. Try not to thicken it up too much, but still just finish your line. And it's like one of those things that, you know, people tell you, no one else would notice that. It's only going to be you. That's exactly what's happening there. If you have a line that is a touch thicker, it's probably only you that's going to see it. So don't worry about it too much. Don't throw your whole piece out. Coloring in every single one of those lines, and it's still easy to see. Now, while I do this, I'm following a certain set series of guidelines, but you'll still notice that each one of my E's looks different still. And that's because this is just taking regular writing and making it look like brush lettering. It's not brush lettering where every single one of your E's is expected to look the same. This is part of why anyone can do this sort of fauxligraphy and be successful at it. You don't have to worry about every one of your letters looking the same. That being said, if I was to rewrite this word, I would want to give more space to this body, to this little like teardrop portion of the E. Instead of being up so high, because that's, here, let's cut this. That's as tall as it is. There, it's getting measured against the door frame. It's just a tiny baby E, but this is not halfway down the E. Instead, that's like 2/3 of the way up the E. It should be meeting right around here instead. That's about where the loop should be, just to balance that E out a little bit more. But again, that's one of those things that if you've written this on a card or anywhere, honestly, you're probably the only one that's going to be nitpicky about that. Now I want to add a little flair onto the ends of our letters. So we can even use the letters that we've already used here and just add a little bit of flair. And so what that means is coming along to the end, draw your curve up a little bit, and we're going to do a little bit of an expansion on both sides. I should have used the dark one, but both sides of that final stroke. This sort of gives it, you know, it's like leaving the room with a touch of fancy happening. And you can also do that at the beginning. So you can draw out this line here, trace over it, and then on either side at the end here, just add a little bit more thickness. If you only draw from that midpoint though, you're going to end up with this sort of drop dot where the ink suddenly started flowing. So I always like to start right from the body of another letter and trace either side of those lines. And that gives you just a little extra something special on either side of your letter. We can do that for peace as well. Now it's hard to do it here because this is a straight line. So instead of having a straight line, you want to give yourself a bit of a curve. Probably better to do this not after the fact, but plan out for it a little bit. And then on that curve, just plump it up on either side. So this side comes in a little bit more and this side flares out a little bit more. We can add something to the beginning of it as well. Here, we'll do it going up this time because here we did it going down. And you can do it either way. So you can do it going down on the front or the bottom, or front or the back, and you can do it going up on the front or the back. But draw that curved line and then come in and flare on one side. Oh, I went a little bit off, that's okay. And then flare on the other side and color that little flare in. And that just gives it a little something special for leading in and leading out of your word. Should we do one final word or should we just call it there? How are we feeling? Let's do a word with a double letter, because double letters can be tricky because you want them to look perfect and the same every time. But if I was to write the word fall, those letters don't look the same at all. And that's okay. That's the whole point of doing your fauxligraphy, is that you can have more freedom with the way that your letters look. So let's write the word fall, but make it obviously much wider in here for those L's, because that way we'll have some space for the downstrokes. And also don't worry about your letters being perfect. So F-A-L-L, there. Super messy, right? It's still gonna look great when you add your fauxligraphy, even though it's messy. And that's one of the things that I also like about fauxligraphy. Oh, sorry, I'm sitting on the ground trying to adjust. It's very uncomfortable. But with this word, it doesn't need to be perfect. With Fauxligraphy, it's still going to look absolutely gorgeous, and it almost gives you the freedom to be a little bit crazy with your letters. All right, so again, we start with the same thing. Ghost lettering, we're going up here. Oh, there's our downstroke. Trace on one side, and now trace on the other side. So we're thickening it up. Upstroke, upstroke. Oh, here we're going down again. Remember your A, sometimes it's just a little bit there, just like we were doing with the C, because that's the portion where it is coming right down, and then it goes into the curve. You don't want to put any weight into the curve until you go in and redraw your line. And now our A on both sides there, and the L's. So here's curved, here's the part where it's coming straight down. Here it's sort of going to my elbow, here it's coming straight down. And again, for this one, elbow, straight down. Elbow, straight down. We're not going all the way to the tops and bottoms. We're just doing that really straight portion in the middle. And then trace those lines again. So we'll start at the very beginning, tracing our upstroke and connect to one side of the line. And tracing that same upstroke again so that it looks very natural, and to the outside of the line. And now let's go in from the bottom, tracing up, and now from the outside of our line, tracing up on that same place. So we've really widened that part there. And I know that we only need to go in here once, but always trace it twice to give that natural change to the width that might happen. And we're going to trace to both sides of the A and off both sides of the A and up this upstroke. You're always doing it twice. So close off that top, and now we'll trace this to the upstroke, trace the other side to the upstroke, and take a break in the middle there. In that downstroke, no one's going to see that you lifted up your pen and readjusted or anything like that. But if you try to do it in the middle of a line out here, it will be super obvious. So remember, if you're nervous about getting your curve properly or any of your strokes, just trace over it a few times to get your muscle memory, and then go in with your pen on the page and trace over it. And we'll do it one more time for the other side of the line. And then tracing out one side of the line and tracing out the other side of the line. So as soon as you're not tracing from your secondary drawn line there, it should go right into the same line so that you're tracing a single line instead of separating into two. So here we go, up and over to one side, and tracing again up and over to the other side, and then coming on out here. And because I'm already thinking of the end, I do want it to have a bit of a swoop. So come out and give a swoop. Come out and join right back up with that first line and give a swoop. And now we can add on some thickness at the end, one side, and thickness on the end on the other side. If you want to do that on the front here, oh, the way that I let it in is a little bit weird, but we'll just do a little bit of thickness on one side, a little bit of thickness on the other side, and draw that in. And now the final bit where you get to just color those lines, and because you've already matched up all of your inside strokes and outside strokes, you end up with nice smooth curves on both sides of your line. And there we go. We have the word fall, and it doesn't look perfect, but that's the point, is that you want to be able to have freedom with your lettering to not always have it look the exact same. We want it to be able to look unique and look like your regular handwriting would, except just a little bit fancier. So like I said, if you don't have the letter pump up sheet that shows you all of the cheater letters and the step-by-step guide, you can download this on YouTube below this video. And it also gives you your letter pump up practice. So you've done 3 words with me already. Go through and pick some of your other favorite words and practice pumping them up. Also look for little areas where you think, well, I might want to fix this little portion up a touch next time. don't think that means that this one is thrown out. This is actually a way for you to figure out how to make your work better the next time that you do it. So nothing like this is ever a waste. Instead, it's such an important learning opportunity. For instance, I might look back at this A and think, well, that one is a little bit tiny compared to some of these other letters. So next time I write fall, I'm gonna pump up that A a little bit. That's a fitting thing to think of, considering it's a pump up practice. And also, when you're going in to do it, think about how you're going to finish and end your letters. Sometimes what I like to do is just not even include those at first. Do my letters and then go in and throw those bad boys in afterwards so that you have a beautiful extension into your letter and a beautiful extension out of your letter, really making the whole thing shine. But doing your fauxligraphy so that you're tracing on both sides, those short downstrokes, and then retracing every single one of your upstrokes as well, that's how you're going to get really smooth, beautifully balanced fauxligraphy every single time. Brittany, I'm so glad that you could join me there. I hope that you have gotten a lot out of this, and I want you to totally feel empowered, not just to do your brush lettering, but to join me for the next few weeks for some amazing, cute little, like, look at that. Hello, it even has light inside. And I made this from scratch and it costs less than $10. So make sure that you subscribe to my YouTube so that you don't miss a single one of these tutorials. I can't wait to share them with you and keep working on your lettering. I'll see you again very, very soon, like next Tuesday, same time. See you then.